There's even more cops out there. We all left.
Okay, good morning, everybody. The time being 9:05, I'd like to call today's Judicial and Public Safety Committee meeting to order. May I please have roll call to establish quorum?
Gums. Linder,
Linder online.
Roth, Tepe, Williams,
Williams here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Molina.
Molina present.
Do you have an in-person quorum?
We have an in-person quorum and we have a remote attendance request from Mr. Linder. Any objection to allowing him to present to be remote? Okay, Mr. Linder, welcome. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. I'll entertain a motion for consent for minutes from from June 13th.
Roth will make a motion that we do a unanimous approval. Make a request, sorry.
Any opposition? Okay, minutes are approved. We have no one signed up for public comment on agenda or non-agenda items. At this time, I'd like to move the agenda just a little bit to allow for business at hand to take place. If the committee allows me, I'd like to move the executive session for release of closed minutes up, as well as under court services, the 3 resolutions, C, D, and E. Any opposition to that? Okay, so at this time, I'd like to request a motion to go into just do this. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session to release closed session minutes.
Tepe so moves. Linder second.
Okay, may I please have roll call?
Linder,
Here.
Roth here.
to go into executive
Yes or
session.
no, please?
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
No, I just.
Gums, Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Yes.
Enter an executive.
Okay, we're in executive session. We should be about 5 minutes. So thank you, everybody.
All right, everybody online that's joining the closed session, please accept those invites. I will let you know when we're ready to go.
Yesterday, Tuesdays was a disaster. I joined.
Yes.
Okay, we are now in executive session. May I please? Oh, sorry. We are almost in executive session.
Well, that brat, he controls everything, doesn't he?
I have one person online that has not accepted the invite to go into the closed session. We need you to accept before we can begin.
Chair, do we need to mention it in the, when we approve it about the scribbler error? Okay.
Yes.
No, we aren't the one.
You'll notate the Scrivener's error
All right.
when we vote to.
Just call for approval
Just-
with the corrections. of Scrivener's error.
All right, you are in open session.
Okay, we are back in open session. May I please have roll call?
Gums, Linder,
Linder present.
Here.
Tepe,
Be here.
Williams, Leonard,
Leonard here.
Molina,
Molina present.
Pirog.
I'm here. I'd like to entertain a request to vote on the release of closed session minutes as mentioned in Exhibit A with the Scribner's correction. May I please have a motion and a second?
Roth will make the motion.
Leonard second.
Okay, and may I please have roll call?
Linder,
Abstain.
Roth,
Roth here.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Madam Chair,
Yes.
slight point of order. I believe they have to vote either yes or no to accept the.
Yes.
thank you. Molina,
Yes. Okay, that motion is approved. Okay, so next item on the agenda is under court services, we have resolution C.
Good morning, thank you. In my presentation this morning, I will present a little bit about the population of our juvenile detention facility and why we're able to take more contracts from downstate. We have been, I believe that you may be aware that there have been several closures of juvenile detention facilities downstate for legal reasons and for staffing reasons. We're very fortunate that we don't have that issue here, but that has left downstate counties looking for facilities that are able to hold juvenile offenders. And so we would like to enter into contracts with these three or intergovernmental agreements with these three counties in order to take their kids. These counties are under 100,000 population base. We don't anticipate getting more than 3 or 4 minors a year. And so having said all that, I'm looking for your approval to enter into these agreements.
Okay, may I have a motion and a second for resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Carroll County for juvenile detention services?
Madam Chair, could we do all 3 counties that, no, have to do them
Yeah, we
separately?
were told separately.
Move.
Roth will second.
Mr. Leonard moves, Mr. Roth seconds. Any comments or questions? May I please have roll call?
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yeah.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this one passes. Page. Okay, that's okay. Okay, next item is authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Montgomery County for juvenile detention services. May I have a motion and a second? to
Roth will make
discuss?
the motion.
Potentially approved. Mr. Roth moves.
Leonard seconds.
Mr. Leonard seconds. Any comments or questions? May I please have roll call?
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Lena, yes. Okay, third resolution is authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Shelby County for juvenile detention services. May I have a motion and a second to discuss and potentially approve?
Roth will make the motion.
Mr. Roth moves.
Leonard second.
Mr. Leonard seconds. Any comments or questions regarding this resolution? Hearing and seeing none, may I please have roll call?
Linder,
Linder, yes.
Roth,
Roth, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Molina.
Molina, yes. Okay, this resolution also passes.
Thank you.
So we will go back to the top of the agenda. For anybody online, we are working to update the agenda. Blair's working on that for us, but it is on the website. So if you want to follow along in the meantime, it's on the website. So we will move along. Item 7, monthly financial reports are on file. Item 8 is our merit commission. I have someone here from the Merit Commission to present. And again, we do ask that everybody please keep their presentations 5 to 10 minutes.
How about 10 seconds? Our budget is actually up 0.9%, and all that is based on an increase to healthcare for our secretary, a small increase to our dental, all of our other things that we have responsibilities for as far as advertisement and testing and such is all the same. So we're going to cost you an extra $860.
All right, gold star for the Merit Commission. Any other questions? Okay, thank you for being here, sir. Okay, next on the agenda is KingCom.
Good morning. Our monthly reports are on file. I do want to highlight while Blair is bringing up our presentation, a telecommunicator anniversary. Telecommunicator Adam Holt, who's worked midnight shift for a number of years, is celebrating 19 years with KingCom in June. So that is a very long time, 19 years. And we have a number, I think we're up to about 4 telecommunicators that are over 20 years with KingCom. So that's a great achievement when the average length of a telecommunicator is about 8 to 10 years. We have, again, our monthly reports on file, our volume of activity is on file, and I will jump into our budget when available. It's the one in the packet. Yes, thank you. Great. Next slide, please. All right, so KingCom for our FY25 budget, the agencies that we dispatch for have not changed. Again, we are 911. We are the vital link between the public and the public safety agencies devoted to protecting them. So we dispatch for 8 police departments, 7 fire departments, and a number of county agencies that are listed below. Next slide, please. Every year when we put together our budget, I like to do a quick snapshot of activity of how we're trending year to date. So this is current in June year to date, and this is all our calls for service and how we're trending. You can see 5 years ago, we were up to 37,327. And again, this is only half the year, 6 months in. And then we had our dip from COVID, and you can see that we've slowly built back up. And at this point, we are actually trending higher than we were 5 years ago with 42,115 calls for service. So our activity continues to increase gradually over the last couple of years. Next slide, please. Our organizational structure has not changed. This is the same as it showed last year as well. Our administrative staff there on the top, as well as our 3 shifts of telecommunicators. So we do 3 shifts, again, 24/7, 365, 3 shifts of telecommunicators, day shift, afternoon shift, as well as midnight shift. Next slide, please. We are a special revenue fund. So our fees, or excuse me, our revenue comes from our subscriber fees, our audio recordings, our 911 surcharge revenue. And then I have added a new line this year for ETSB reimbursement. This is not new. Every year we go back to our emergency systems telephone board with, costs that qualify for reimbursement. But typically when we do that, it comes out of the line item. So the expense will come out of a specific line item, and the reimbursement has been going into our 911 surcharge revenue. That makes it a little more difficult to track. Is our reimbursement on track, or is it our 911 surcharge revenue? So working with finance this year, we asked for a separate revenue item just so it's easy and clear to see in our budget what we've applied for in revenue and what we've received, and those totals should balance throughout the year. I will say at this point in the year, we continue to work on our subscriber agreement. So our subscriber agreement is expired. So you will see fund balance utilization right there for the 286,550. We are working on our new agreement. We need our subscriber fees to, make up the difference for what we're receiving in revenue. And that's agreement we continue to work on. Next slide, please. So 88% of our budget and our expenditures actually come from our personnel, which are listed there. And then we have our contractual commodities and our transfers to other funds goes to our IT support and the great IT support we receive throughout the year. One significant change you will see is our commodities. I think for the last couple of years, our commodities have shown about $7,800. I have allocated, again, a bill that we pay every single year, which is our phone line costs, into commodities. That's line 6,400, or 64,000, I guess. That should be where I actually pay those phone bills from that line item. So I've just allocated that money to better reflect an appropriate expenditure within the budget. Next slide, please. So with 88% of our budget being our personnel, our 24 budget, our 25 budget, I just want to highlight that when I presented the budget at this point last year, we were still in negotiations for our collective bargaining agreement. So I think we showed like a 1.9% increase or something like that because we were only doing step movement. Now, our collective bargaining agreement as of December 2023 is ratified. Those new salaries are in there. And for their step increases going into next year, they will receive 3.5% on the increase. Our budget does not include any additional positions, and we do have the allowed vacancy that is in there as well. Next slide, please. So overall, it does show a net change of 4.06%. And however, in our last budgets leading up to this, in our old collective bargaining agreement, we were showing a very small increase. So now that those salaries are in line, I think that this 4.6% and the net change of $112,000 is coming from the changes in benefits and personnel. Next slide, please. I do this every year. It's something that keeps me organized. So we put this in the slide as well. Just a breakdown of the points that I've articulated and the difference in funds and a way to kind of answer any questions easily in terms of the increases. And that is our last slide. If anybody has any questions.
Okay, any questions for KingCom this time? Okay, Mr. Ross?
Blair, can you turn off the contents on that? Top. No. The X at the top, just so we don't see, it'll make the document bigger.
The X.
The bookmarks. you want.
The bookmark, sorry. No, I'm just saying, turn the bookmarks off. Yeah. See the X? Oh, okay, never mind then, sorry. I got you.
Do you have a question, Mr. Roth, for Ms. Guthrie? Okay, any questions? Okay. Thank you. And I guess I'd like to, I forgot to say this in the beginning. This is our first review of these budgets. The majority, as you all know, it's been kind of painful going through the budget process. It's new, so thank you all for your patience. This is our first time looking at most of these budgets, so I'm assuming that we're going to have questions or comments later on in the next few months. So just be patient with us, and thank you for allowing us to do this today. Okay, next up is emergency management.
All right, good morning. While Blair gets the presentation on, our report's on file, but I just wanted to point out we had our 7th tornado in the past 12 months in Elburn, just at the tail end of June there. So we've been extremely lucky that they've hit mostly farm areas and non-urban areas. Any of those things that ended up in some of the more urban areas would have been a much different story. So I'll move on to the presentation. So next slide. So we have 5 full-time employees and then a part-time, which is about a quarter of a full-time employee. I've listed out kind of their general duties there. Our fleet is 11 vehicles and 10 trailers. Next slide. Our volunteers are increasing. I think prior to my arrival and in the few years before that, we were having trouble keeping volunteers. That's no longer the case. We're holding on to them. We've added 10 new volunteers this year in 2024. So they're in training, should be done around October. So our volunteer hours are increasing, both in requests for our services as well as their hours. So right now we're on pace for around 13,000 if everything stays up. So we, like I said, the 7 tornadoes in the past 12 months, we're averaging about 204 emergency responses, which is typically assists to police and fire departments, search and rescues, things like that. And then about 120 community event details, which is traffic control for parades and festivals and things like that for some of our Kane County communities. Next slide. So these are our mission and mandates. So pretty much everything we do is mandated either by state law, regulation, or county code. So according to the Illinois Emergency Management Act, every county has to maintain an ESDA, which is a term in the law, but it's a generic one. So that we are an ESDA, even though our title is a little bit different. We have jurisdiction over all the unincorporated areas of the county, as well as the incorporated municipalities who have no established emergency management program, which is 11 of them, typically the smaller ones. And then we also are mandated to support the established ESDAs, which there are 14. According to that code, we are responsible for maintaining programs and capabilities to mitigate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from emergencies and disasters. Next slide. So the Illinois Admin Code 29 Part 301 is kind of the Bible of what the state requires of us. And I won't read all of that, but we're required to do an emergency operations plan every 2 to 3 years. I have that underlined because that length is changing. We expect in the next release of the admin code. Exercises every 6 months. We have to do an update to our ILCAT. A natural hazard mitigation plan we just completed. Next slide. So this is what the county code says about what we're supposed to do. This is just a generic one, kind of that we perform emergency services and disaster functions. Next slide. This is kind of the nuts and bolts of what the county code says that we do. The ones in bold are the things that we do the most. The ones that are lined out are things that we don't really do. So at some point when everyone has a little bit of time, we can probably revise that ordinance. But for now, those are things that we're not really doing. We don't have an agency airboat, and we're not doing radiological monitoring. Next slide. This is kind of an accounting of the programs throughout the county. Like I said, we have 14 that have programs and 11 that don't. Next slide. And then these next ones is I list kind of what the state of it is. One of our challenges is most of our municipal emergency management organizations are run by someone who has another primary job, mostly fire chiefs, police chiefs. The only one, there's 2 in the county that have paid coordinators, and those are the 2 accredited ones, St. Charles and Aurora. So everybody else has limited time and budgets and staff and all that. So we have to provide them some amount of help. Next slide. These are the ones with no program. So we basically serve them as if they were unincorporated. Next slide. So the local emergency planning committee is the mandated part of our organization that handles the hazmat stuff. This is 100% funded by donations, mostly from the chemical facilities. Some of our staff time to do some of the record keeping, but the facilities send us their mandated reports of chemicals that they store, and then we maintain that for the public to request. Next slide. So with that limited money that we receive through those donations, we give small grants to the 3 hazardous material response teams, which is MABUS Division 2 and 13, which are fire departments, and as well as the Kane County Bomb Squad. When there's money, we can issue small grants for equipment and things like that. Next slide. The next slide, one more. So I listed out all of our mission outcomes. I'm not gonna go through all of them other than to say some of our areas we're a little behind in over the past several years. We are accredited, but if we don't keep things up, we could lose our accreditation, which then we would lose grant money that we get every year and be ineligible for future grants. So just some challenges. I'm not placing blame or whether it was budget or COVID or staff or whatever. I just know from coming in, we have some work to do to get us to where we need to be. Next slide. So we're a little bit behind in the EOC. We need to work on some of our technology procedures, and our vehicles are about 15 years old on average. Next slide. Another area that we're behind is in our record keeping. We've begun developing an incident database and better training records, but many policies and procedures are outdated, and we had to redo our volunteer job descriptions, but we're making improvements there. Next slide. So the first really, big initiative that we have is I'm asking to create a new full-time operations manager from the part-time position that we have. With the number of volunteer hours increasing, this person is responsible for managing the scheduling details and overseeing the volunteers. The challenge has been that he gets about 9-10 hours a week, and there's just not enough time to manage all those hours. So 11,000 hours, which is what we did in 2023, is about the equivalent of 5 full-time employees. And there's just some amount of investigating complaints or issues, following up on training, overseeing search and rescue, and there's just not time for all that. I did a research study, and our staffing seems to be a little below the comparable counties by a little over 2 full-time equivalent. One of the things that's different about us is that we have the largest volunteer program in terms of hours, and even volunteers were near the top, but we more than double any other Collier County in the number of volunteers hours done. So if approved, this operations manager position, we would eliminate the part-time current position, and we would go from 5.25 full-time equivalent to 6.0. We have a job description. HR has scored it as a 510 in the compensation plan, and which is a starting salary of just under 66,000 up to 74,000, depending on qualifications. The next couple of pages, I have some of our stats that I used. DuPage, McHenry, and Will are the ones that are most comparable to us. DeKalb and Kendall are very small, very tiny programs, very small populations, so I didn't include them. But you can see all the data there and how all that compares when you line up what the comparable averages are to either what we are or proposed. They come right in line with that. So next slide. And then, so this is our current organizational chart. You can see the circled area on the right is the volunteer training program, which I oversee personally because that part-time person just can't do it. And I wanted to have a hand in getting things straight. With this position, I would like to move that, go to the next slide, underneath that new position so that person can oversee all of that, as well as, volunteer policies and all other stuff, so that all the volunteer program falls under that person. Next slide. So I won't go through these exactly or line by line. I'll note that the second line there, emergency management reimbursement, is our annual grant we get. It's emergency management performance grant, and that's how FEMA through the state funds some of our expenses, and that funds parts of all of our staff. Those numbers keep dropping, and we're anticipating another drop because they're changing the formula. So I think that we're going to probably lose out, and maybe Chicago and Cook County may gain. Next slide. So all of our line items are listed there. Of course, you have our budget reports. There's nothing significant in terms of changes overall, other than the full-time position. Everything else, when you go down a couple more slides, one more, that one, the change in contractuals and commodities is just under 3%. So you can go to the next slide. So this is our special fund on the LEPC, just shows you how that money is used. Next slide. This is the EMA volunteer fund. Again, this is all donations, typically by our municipalities that we assist. They'll provide donations, and that money is used to either fund uniforms or volunteer appreciation or things like that. Next slide. The vehicle summary. This year, we've already been approved to replace a 2001, a 2012 vehicle. Those vehicles are being ordered. And in 2025, the new command post will be in. And then we've requested replacement for the UTV, which is used for search and rescue, and then a 2013 Ford Taurus. Next slide. These are just the details of our vehicles. In red is already approved replacements. In yellow is requested. Next slide. And just a listing of our vehicles and their stats and when we're replacing them. Next slide. Next slide. And one more. And then last slide is the capitals. Oh, sorry, one more. So we requested in the capital budget a new F-150 to pull the Ranger trailer, new Starcom radio so we can expand our volunteers, a new UTV to replace 2006 model, and then software to manage our EOC and incident command that will replace all manual processes. That's my presentation, and if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Mr. Ross?
I had 3 questions. The concerns you brought up, accreditation, do you see any problem with getting that done? Is it this year you have to get them done?
It'll wrap up with the new EOP, which is due right now, is due in March. We're still waiting on the new admin code. It was started in January, and we don't know where it is. So I'm concerned. We don't think there'll be huge changes, but our accreditation will be based on that. I don't anticipate losing it,
Okay.
but I want to make sure we're keeping up with what we have to do and not just doing it to get it done, but to actually be successful in our mission.
Okay. And then on your vehicle, you said you have an average life of 15 years. Would be the recommended, and not that we can afford to get there anytime soon, but
Well, I don't have that's the average age.
Yeah, that's what I'm-
And
yeah.
so we just want to bring it down a little bit. Some of our vehicle, like getting rid of the 2001, the command post and the ATV will bring it down quite a bit. And then I'll be happy with that. Our vehicles last a long time because they're not getting the miles that like say a police or sheriff's squad gets, because they're not out driving around for a whole shift. They're parked typically until they're needed.
I mean, I was kind of just asking what's best practice, 10 years, 8 years,
Um,
100 years? No.
I think I don't have a best practice other than to say it's about maintenance and when their vehicles is reliability. We follow the county's replacement policy. And so when it starts getting over 100,000, then we start to get a little concerned. The vehicles that are the main, like the trucks, the bigger trucks, they don't get driven that much. So if you looked at their mileage, they're at 15 or 20,000
Okay.
at 5 years old.
Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions, Mr. Tuppy?
Yes. Can we go to the general fund personnel page? That's it. Thank you. A couple of questions, Scott. Under the 2024 amended budget, got 391,000 and 11,000 and 14,000. Would I add all 3 of those together and compare that? Would say that they are included in the first line item, which is the 486,000 number.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Understood.
You're increasing salaries and wages from 391,000 to 486,000.
Correct.
But below the 391,000 are cost of living and equity study adjustments.
Correct.
Assuming that those need to, the 3 numbers there, the 391, the 11, the 14 need to be added together and compared to the 485 on an increase basis?
Correct, because those are the cost of living increases that the board did earlier, late last year, I guess, and the equity study, and that's how finance put them into our budget.
So the increase in personnel is based upon a part-time person going to full-time and the normal or the 3.5% that's been suggested for this year. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think any cost of living increase has been factored in because finance does that for us.
Okay.
So I don't think that's factored in.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions at this time? Okay, thank you, Scott. Okay, we will move on to our sheriff. Sheriff Payne, good morning.
Morning, everybody. I would like to ask your permission to take that Safety Act impact presentation
You
and
read my mind.
email it or
If-
share it next month.
That would be perfect if we can do that next month.
Great. I do have a brief recap on it in my last slide on my PowerPoint. Because I know everybody loves the sheriff's office, I just wanted to give an update about our deputy that was involved in the off-duty shooting up in Elgin. He is doing quite fine, resting at home. And the investigation will continue until it's wrapped up. So thanks for everybody's care. All right, Blair, next slide. That's what I looked like 6 years earlier after, after going through all of this. Next slide. All right, as you guys know, we're the biggest employer with the county. We have 3 different divisions. This is our public safety division, the police service one. 94 sworn personnel, 32 civilian support staff. Next slide, Blair. This is our biggest division, corrections. 124 sworn, 24 civilian. Next slide, Blair. And court security are smallest. So these guys have to cover 6 different courthouses too. So they have a big job with 43 people. Next. We did apply for 4 new positions, wellness coordinator, HR manager, who will ultimately replace our retiring HR director, but we need to get that person in that position to learn from her until the retirement. Accounts payable specialist to help out our great CFO sitting over there who put this PowerPoint presentation together. Alicia Dominguez, stand up, take a bow. Thank you so much. And 1 new deputy position, and that would be completely funded by DCFS. It would be an assistant DCFS investigator. Full-time assigned to them, and they pay for everything from benefits, overtime, squad car, et cetera. So pretty good gig. Next. It's just a snapshot of our last few years of financials. You'll notice in 2023, for the first time ever, we closed out over about 2.2 million. The reason for that is we had to pay our corrections retro in their new contract out of that budget year. And we also got hit with a almost $2 million or $1.5 million settlement from our old medical contractor in the jail. So we had to absorb all of that. And that's the way finance closed us out. So you see where we're trending in 24. Blair, next slide. Just a quick look at the financials. Again, I believe this document is, if it's not uploaded, I'll make sure everybody gets a copy of it, but all of our budget reports are uploaded. I won't make your eyes bleed with that up here on the screen. Next slide. What we're looking at in FY25. So we're going to have the public safety, the deputy and sergeant negotiations. We're going to have, that's going to be a big one. Maintenance negotiations, which are 4 people, not a big problem there. Court security officers, we just gave them a great wage increase in their last contract. So I don't anticipate that to be too hurtful. Couple bomb squad notes there, getting a new Thames vehicle, Bearcat. Thames is tactical EMS, Bearcat for SWAT. That's already been approved. We're fighting hard for a lot of different grant options that we're looking at. We're building out the forensics lab using the opioid settlement funds. And we'll just hope to continue our fiscal responsibility as best as possible. Next slide. The main impacts that we may face in FY25 is a potential change to our body cam system. If we do go with another vendor, that will increase our cost because if it's better quality, you're going to have to pay a little bit more for it. And then our jail population, here's a snapshot, has increased 26% in the last 3 months, thanks to the Safety Act. Most of that is the state attorney's office is having a lot of success with their petitions to remand. Not great success, but a lot of success. And there's been a plethora of FTA warrants, failure to appear warrants. And the reason for that is people simply feel like they don't have to go to court anymore. So those warrants get put out and they get brought into custody and they tend to sit. So it's a sad fact to see when you look at it on paper. And I believe that's the last one, boy. Last one. Okay. That's all I've got for you guys, unless you got questions for me.
Okay, any questions at this time for our sheriff? Okay, seeing none, we will keep going. We will continue this conversation, Sheriff Payne. Okay, And then next on the agenda is our coroner. We have our Chief Deputy Coroner here today. I know the reports were placed on file. Coroner Russell is not able to be here. He had a family commitment, but our Deputy Coroner is here if there's any questions regarding that report. And then we look forward to seeing his presentation at a next meeting.
Good morning. Our report is on file. I don't know if anyone has any questions that I could answer.
No questions? Okay. Okay, thank you for being here. We will move on to Judiciary and Courts.
Good morning. Andrea Bryan, Court Administrator for the Judiciary. Chief Judge could not be here this morning. Okay. We have submitted our budget presentation. We also submitted the two reports, reports 1 and 2, as required. So I'll just do a brief overview of our budget. Next, thank you. Okay. So we've got our judiciary org chart. We'll talk about the changes in revenue, some increase in revenue that we've had, and then the changes in personnel, contractual, and commodities expenses. This is our organizational chart. As you can see, the Chief Judge oversees directly roughly just under 50 county employees. Along with that are some state employed court reporters. We have a state employed arbitration center administrator. And then, of course, 31 judges as well. In the larger umbrella, the Chief Judge's Office oversees all of court services, the Kane County Diagnostic Center, and the JJC. Next slide, please. Thank you. So revenue. So we have 5 revenue line items. Some of them have not changed. The first one is our data court grant. We're awarded that every year in the same amount by the state to do work in our abuse and neglect court. So that's the $41.50. Judicial technology fine, those are fees collected to provide various electronics and different type of need, like laptops, Surface Pros, things that the judges and the staff would use. Fees have gone down, so we're expecting a decrease in that. Interpreter services. So I think several years ago, we've presented to the board that we were changing our interpreter services, kind of our department. We reorganized it. We have an interpreter coordinator and then an assistant interpreter coordinator. And now we pretty much function with off the state list for interpreters, which are registered and certified. That has given us a better quality of interpreters and just all around better service. We've got written contracts in place with our contract interpreters. So this is a reimbursement by the state that they give if we work off their list for certified and registered interpreters. Every year, you'll see on the next slide, we have increased our reimbursement amount. So when we started in FY19, we didn't really ask for reimbursement because the state was at a point where it was hit or miss and we weren't sure if we were getting it. We have regularly asked for and submitted reimbursement for our invoices, and you can see every year it's increased. So typically our reimbursements will meet or almost may sometimes exceed what our expenses are for our interpreter line item. So this year we're on track to hit almost 600,000 in reimbursement. Next slide, thank you. Personnel. So we are requesting to maintain 3 vacant positions that we currently have. We're asking for slight increases in the salary amounts. Personnel changes, you can see from the 2024 numbers, that is the initial adopted budget for 24. Since then, you can see we've had some merit, we've had some equity adjustments, and the 3% cost of living that finance provided to departments the middle of this year. So that accounts for an increase, as well as finance automatically put in our budget the 2.5 for non-union county staff. So that accounts for the difference between the two numbers. Next slide, thank you. Contractuals, we asked for several increases last year because our line items had remained fairly flat. So this year we're only asking for a few additional increases. Court-appointed counsel, the Supreme Court had increased rates on hourly for in-court and out-of-court time to maintain the 4 special our court-appointed counsel. We've increased our contractual rate. That's what accounts for that. Plus, they seem to be doing a little bit more appellate work. and that's work outside of our contractual obligations. The next increase is juror expenses. That provides our jurors with food and snacks, but the majority of that increase, we were lucky enough to have a state allocation pay for the cost of a new jury management program called Genesis. It is with our existing vendor. So we have purchased that through the allocation, and the increase, we have to though pay maintenance and yearly costs for that. And then lastly, liability insurance. We are required to keep insurance on the current chief judge and the acting chief judge. Costs for coverage have increased, so that accounts for the minor increase there. So the total increase is just over, I think, just over 60,000, which is roughly 3% in total. Next slide, commodities increases we asked for last year. Those line items are sufficient. We're not asking for anything else. So our commodities increase is 0. And I think, is that the last slide, Blair? Okay. So overall, the direction that finance gave when we were doing kind of the budget kickoff meeting was, one, that the county would be giving 2.5% for personnel. So that's what you see in our budget, nothing more. And then they asked the departments keep their expenses to increases of no more than 3%. Our increases that we're asking for are 3%. So we have not gone over that amount either. So our increase total for expenses is 5.5%. And you'll see that in the worksheets that are provided in the reports. Thank you. That is all. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
And any questions? Okay, none at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we have, did we do the law library? Okay.
Legal Center for about 30 years. Again, I'm Hallie Eichert. As you can see, we are a special fund within the county. We're governed by statute, and they're mandated by statute to be freely available to all licensed Illinois attorneys, judges, and other public officials of the county, and all members of the public whenever the courthouse is open, and may include self-help legal centers. So what basically that says is our primary people that we assist are your constituents, so the general public. So please feel free to refer people into us. I have left, if any of your constituents have legal issues or questions, even just generally, if they're not involved in anything, just feel free to please go ahead and refer them to us. I've left some pamphlets and some business cards if you guys have any questions or want to refer us out. Next slide. I will not bore you with reading that. I'm pretty sure you all can read very well. Basically, the central role of the county law library includes creating informed legal consumers with realistic expectations of the legal system, while ensuring at the same time that they have a positive contact and experience with the court system and the government as a whole. Next slide. In activating our vision, we have created public programs and partnerships. These are just a few of the ones we have created. We have a Lawyer in the Public Library partnership with Gail Borden Public Library, Santori Public Library, Fox River Valley Public Library in Dundee, where we embed attorneys within those libraries one evening a month, and the attorneys volunteer their time to assist people with legal questions. We have 2 divorce and family law help programs every week. One of them is Monday mornings. It's a walk-in service. And then we have another program running Thursdays that is a call-in service. We also work very closely with the kudos to the circuit clerk's office for running the expungement clinics. Those have been highly successful. And there are talks of expanding those. Currently they're held at local public libraries, but we're also talking of including one at the Kane County Law Library as well. And then we also host the Kane County Bar Association's Driver's Privilege Clinic, again, where attorneys volunteer their time to assist people with driver's license issues. We also, some of the other things that we host the drug court book club in the law library. We also assist a lot with mock trial competitions at the collegiate and high school level. We provide free children's books at the National Night Out program to the sheriff's office, and we do a lot of traveling around and teaching legal research classes at the public libraries, as well as speaking to self-represented litigant issues at conferences, things of that nature. Something we would like to reinstate going forward. We've been on hiatus for a few years thanks to our lovely pandemic. But we are looking to reinstate, and you'll see it reflected in our revenue, of family reading night with the judges, as well as a Boy Scout Law Merit Badge Day. We're hoping to get those up and running in the next year. Next slide. Constituents directly assisted. These are just the numbers of people that we directly touch, not the people that walk into the law library that already know what they're doing, that really don't need our assistance, that just use our resources, use our computers, walk out, you know, other than a quick conversation, there's no assistance needed. These are the people that we directly help. So as you can see, our website visits are just over 14,000. Total constituents directly assisted, and this is just through June of this year, 6 months. We've assisted over 2,000 people. And as you can see, 95% of those are 96% are actually the general public, meaning non-county employees. We also strongly assist people with Zoom court. We have found Zoom court makes people, it is very advantageous in a lot of situations, but we work with the population that Zoom court makes them very uncomfortable. They want to make sure the judge knows they're there. We hear continually, I don't want no warrant. They want to be in the building. They want somebody to have eyes on them that they are attending court. So they will come into the law library. It's also a lot of people still do not have the technological skills or the ability to pay for the technology that they need to access Zoom court. So we deeply assist people with Zoom court on a daily basis in getting them to the right courtrooms. Next slide. As you can see, we do this all with a mere full-time staff of 3, myself, a librarian, and a library assistant. And then we also gratefully every year have been granted an Illinois Justice Corps Fellow, which is an offshoot of AmeriCorps. They are a person that sits in the law library and assists us helping the public, but they are paid through the Illinois Justice Corps program. They're not paid through us. So it's essentially another employee that we get for free. And that's pretty much, I wanted to make this short and sweet about what we do. I know you guys have a lot on your agendas. So if you have any questions in terms of our budget, again, we are a special fund. So we are supported through $20 off every civil filing fee. There are no remarkable changes in our budget for this next year. I do hope, I have applied for and have received in the past and hope to receive again a $30,000 grant through the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts and Illinois Supreme Court to Justice, Access to Justice Commission. So I'm hoping to receive that again to help pay for. We do have paid interpreters at all of our Lawyer in the Library programs. Unfortunately, we cannot use the certified interpreter program because Andrea has hired them all already. So we do through the grant, through the $30,000 grant we use to pay other interpreters that will work with us on the evenings and during normal court hours. And we are hoping to replace our 30-year-old public furniture this year, at least some of it. So you have any questions?
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to State's Attorney.
Good morning. State's Attorney Mosser couldn't be here. I'm not sure if she zoomed in or not. She promised to give me an introduction, but if not, I'll just start right into the budget presentation. I did.
Hey, Terry, hold on.
sorry.
I'm sorry. I am here, but Terry has all of the details. I am here for questions.
Okay, Terry, carry on.
Okay, I'll start over. The at last month's JPS meeting, I made a presentation. So this one is going to be just an update. I'll be able to go through the text portion, I think, fairly quickly. And if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer them though. But so This is just a description of the overall team. Next slide, please. The team breakdown of the SAO is in vertical units. Next slide, please. And some of the qualifications of the personnel that are leads on the various programs within the SAO. Next slide, please. Last month, I promised an org chart. There is a killer org chart at the end of this presentation that I will slide through pretty quickly. And then this is a draft budget proposal as of the information that was available July 5th. The only significant difference from what I reported last month are that we now have the health and dental rates. So those have been updated. And there are still some minor differences between what we have in our budget presentation and what has been migrated into New World, and we're working with finance to resolve those. Next slide, please. Again, this is the same chart that I showed last time. It is, next slide, I'll explain it here. So this is by category, the revenues and expenses that we are proposing in this budget. The left-hand column there is the combined amount. The next column to the right, the general fund, identifies and isolates only the general fund activities. Civil division is a quasi special revenue fund, so we've got that isolated as well. And then all of the other special revenue funds, which are self-balancing, are in the far right-hand column. You can see that the total expense in the general fund, we have expenses in excess of revenues, about 9.4 million, 2.8 million in the civil division. Next slide, please. This is, again, then a summary that compares FY24 amended budget to that proposed draft using the same filters and categories. Next slide, then, please. So the gold highlighted is our FY24, the information that we're working on now. You can see that the state's attorney combined was $11.8 million. We're at 12.1, 12.2. That's an increase of just about 3% year over year. Next slide, please. This, the next slide is going to do a comparison category by category. Again, as has been previously mentioned, we were instructed to limit contractual commodities to a 3% increase. Through some careful review of our expenses, we actually are projecting a decrease in those areas. So next slide, please. See the year over year change. The gray highlighted areas are the dollar changes in the various categories, 361,000 at that combined SAO level, which is 3.06%. You can see the percentage changes in the white shaded area. And the highlighted red box there are the contractual and commodities, which are, as you can see, slightly down from our FY24 budget. Next slide, please. Salary analysis. We have a base salary that is in effect for all of our employees as of July 5th. That salary included the mandated COLA increases for our DCF case managers that came into effect July 1st. Those are 100% grant funded positions. It also includes the new rate for the state's attorney, which is established by Springfield. We have projected a 3% COLA increase for every eligible person other than law clerks and seasonal interns. And those positions that got the COLA increase due to the DCFS grant mandate are not included in our internal 3% COLA. Next slide, please. Again, we have a salary that included changes and promotions that we incur on a normal basis in our office. In some cases, the cost of the new hires, where we were able to recruit more experienced ASAs to replace entry level, it actually increased the individual budget line for that particular position, but not in total. We're not increasing any countywide or office-wide for merit increases this year. We appreciate what was done in FY24, and that has certainly been a great asset to us in terms of how we are able to recruit and retain qualified state's attorneys. So next slide, please. We do have a number of changes between FY24 and FY25 that occur regularly as we rearrange the office and reassign positions. Because we have a number of funds that are part of our operation that sometimes impacts the general fund and sometimes impacts the special revenue funds. It's something that is just a factor that we can't avoid as we manage. And state's attorney has, again, as I referenced, they manage in a team concept. So as the teams change, we recently had a new director or new lead ASA in the domestic violence unit who came from general fund. So they're offsetting in expenses, but which fund is impacted makes the changes. Bottom line is that even using the, pardon me, even using the 3% COLA increase where it's applicable, the net year-over-year salary increase is 2.68%. Next slide, please. This is the breakdown of all the individual funds from FY24 amended budget, the FY25 proposed budget, individual changes and the percentage changes in those categories. Next slide, please. So as we talked about again last month, we are always looking for grant opportunities. We have been awarded combination of State's Attorney Mosser and her influence down in Springfield that we were able to earn a $1 million DCEO grant. That's not been included in the budget presentation at this point because we're uncertain as to the timing of that award. The award is based on the state's fiscal year, and our budget naturally is based on the county's fiscal year. We do, though, have 33 positions within the SAO that are subsidized entirely or substantially by the 8 grants that we do currently have in existence. Next slide, please. As we mentioned, many of those have already been renewed. We have 4 that are up for renewal, and we have one. Let's go one more slide, please. This is still on. Okay, one more slide then. I like it better when I have the clicker. So this is, we have changed in the position count overall from 193 to 198. That's because we include every law clerk, every summer intern. We actually have 1 less ASA and 4 fewer full-time staff, but we have more part-time, more law clerks and temporary. So the impact on the position control is more significant than the actual financial impact. Next slide, please. Here's the breakdown of that comparison. You can see we have 1 fewer ASA. We have 4 fewer full-time staff, 3 more part-time staff, 5 more law clerks, 2 more interns that only work a period of the year. Next slide, please. This is just basically an explanation of this. As of July 5th, we have 2 budgeted vacancies right now. That was 1 more than we had a month ago because things change from day to day and week to week. Next slide, please. Okay, so the org chart, we'll just go through this really quickly, but as a matter of legend, all of the blue positions are state's attorneys, all the green positions are staff. This is the primary breakdown. Okay, you go through it as fast as you want here because we can't really dwell on the detail, but we do have it. They're all identified. It gives you a sense of the organizational structure and the sheer number of people that are involved with this. If there are questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them, but to go over them line by line doesn't make a lot of sense. We're getting close. Another one. Okay, okay. So the other thing that we talked about last month was the pending grants that we have. I spoke about the DCEO grant. We will be pulling in $1 million. It may be partially allocated to FY '24 and some to FY '25. The exact split on that is not known at this point. So when that becomes available, we will include it. We are also on the congressional shortlist for a $475,000 technology grant. We feel confident that it's going to be approved, but it's subject to final revision and passage, but that will be pulled in as it becomes known. Like most grants, that is a reimbursement grant, though. It will not have a direct impact on the bottom line. It will allow us to replace and expand our computer equipment and some office equipment in general terms without impacting the bottom line. So if there are questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to try.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hunt? Okay. Oh, I do have one, Mr. Tempe, go ahead.
Thank you. Something that wasn't here in the presentation, and I think very pleasantly so, is the challenge that over the past several years associated with hiring ASAs and the compensation associated with that and the ability to effectively staff the organization. It appears as though that challenge has lessened in finding effective personnel. So it looks like things are much more stable in the ability for you to be effectively staffed and do an effective job. And I just wanted to get that kind of a question answered. Is that correct, or?
Yes, obviously we have at one point, I think we had as many as 22 vacancies between ASAs and staff. We're down to 2. We are able to recruit because obviously the more competitive salary base makes it a more attractive position to come into. We've been able not only though to recruit qualified first-time entry-level positions, we've also been able to successfully recruit qualified, experienced ASAs, which has a benefit. Obviously, we benefit by their experience. We also benefit by the fact that they don't require the amount of training that entry-level ASAs do. So there are multiple benefits to being able to offer a competitive salary. And yes, fingers crossed, we're at that position right now.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to hear that.
Okay, any further questions, Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hunt, I just wanted to make sure I understood this correctly because I was very pleasantly surprised with the presentation. But it looks like overall to the general fund, you're requesting about a 2.68% increase.
For salary and personnel, yes, it's about 3.0% overall.
Right. And that does not include this $1 million grant that you've been awarded, but you don't know when you'll receive.
That's correct.
So in essence, it's going to lessen it even more. So thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the information.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move on to the agenda to our public defender.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. So our reports for the month are on file. Also, the budget reports that go along with the slideshow are also on file. Next slide, please. So these are our positions. We are at 53 positions. This has not, or I'm sorry, 54, my math. This has not changed from last year. So we are still the same. Next slide, please. And this is our organizational chart, which also has not changed from last year. We added 4 new positions in 2023 that were part of the Pretrial Fairness Act. Those have been reflected on the organizational chart. Next slide, please. And this is just a snapshot of our opened and closed files over the last several years. These numbers were up to July 5th of 2024. So we are on track to come very close to previous years. Couple of areas where we are seeing increases is abuse and neglect. I know that we have come to the board before to speak about abuse and neglect. Those numbers continue to rise, as well as our domestic battery offenses. With our pretrial fairness in courtroom 005, majority of the cases that we see down there are domestic related, and those are majority of the cases that we are defending on the detention hearings as well. Next slide, please. And then this is just a slide of our murder appointments. They continue to increase. Last year, we had 26 murder appointments, and we currently have 20 open murders in our office. And as you can see from the slide, that is a huge increase from years before. It has kind of slowed down this year, which is good news all around, but we still are working on the open files that we do have. So while overall in courtrooms, in the majority of the courtrooms, numbers have not increased, there are specific areas where numbers are increasing. Additionally, in regards to the Pretrial Fairness Act, we came into this not really knowing what it was going to look like. We did revamp courtroom 005, but what we have found is that the increase that it is caused in all of our courtrooms in the amount of time and attention that the attorneys have to spend on these cases. Many times the cases do not, while they initiate in courtroom 005, there are issues that arise in the trial courtrooms as well in regards to sanctions hearings, petitions to revoke pretrial release, and detention hearings that move into the trial courtrooms. So while we were anticipating the increase in 005, I would say that what we have learned in not quite a year yet is that it is also an increase on all of our courtrooms. So next slide, please. So this is a snapshot of our salaries and wages. As I indicated, our report is on file, the budget report. So this is just a small snapshot. I won't go over great detail. I'm just trying to hit on the areas where there were increases. The only increase in our salaries and wages is that we do have union employees who are under their collective bargaining agreement get a 6% cost of living increase this year. And then for the rest of the personnel, it does reflect the 2.5 COLA increase that the county board requested. Next slide, please. For pretrial release weekends, as I've indicated, that courtroom 005 has been very busy since this began in September. We are mandated, the Public Defender's Office, to represent every person who appears in that courtroom. This requires in-person confidential conversations between the attorney and the client. So just as a reminder, our attorneys are down in that courtroom at 8 a.m., 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We speak to the clients from 8 to 10, and then hearings begin at 10. The attorneys are arriving in the office around 7:30 to begin preparing for the discovery and documents that we receive from the state's attorney's office. When we budgeted for this last year, we did request an increase to the stipend that was given for the weekends and holidays. Part of my budget request this year is to increase that slightly again. We have found that for the weekends and the holidays, where we thought would be a little bit of shorter of a day, it is turning into a full day for those attorneys. This is a voluntary basis. They do it for the stipend, but court is set to last until 3 o'clock. There have been times when court itself has gone past 3 o'clock, but the attorneys are not leaving at 3 o'clock. They remain in the office for up to several hours after that to prepare the cases for the next day and to indicate notes and make phone calls on the cases that they handled for that day. Next slide, please. So based upon that, I am requesting in the fiscal year 25 budget an increase for the stipends for the attorneys that volunteer for Saturday and Sunday and for the weekends. So that is a $16,300 increase from fiscal year 24. Next slide, please. And then the only other increase that we have in our budget outside of salary and wages is our contractual expenses. That's an increase of $3,168. That is our Westlaw contract, which is how we research and research case law and our issues that come up in court, and also our CLEAR contract. That is a program that our investigators use to search for witnesses, to search for clients, to find people to help us defend our cases. And those are both contracts that we are currently in, and those are the increases reflected on those. Next slide, please. So for our fiscal year 25 budget, it does not include any additional positions. We do currently have 2 vacant positions which fall within the guidelines of fiscal year 25. That is 1 attorney and 1 trial support. Just to kind of touch on what Mr. Tepe spoke about before, the increases that we received in salary this year have been a game changer for us. At this time last year, we had 7 vacant positions, all attorney positions. I spent 2 years, almost 2 years, covering our misdemeanor DUI court because we had no one else to put in that courtroom. We are down to 1 attorney and 1 trial support. We are currently still interviewing for the attorney position. And after we get that started, we will be working on the trial support. So this has been has made it much easier for us to attract individuals. And not only that, but more important to me is to retain the people that we do have. When I brought people in to explain to them what their new salaries were going to be, I cannot tell you the number of people that I had no idea were looking for jobs. Because they just couldn't afford to remain here, and were just completely thrilled that they would be able to stay because they love their job, they love working in King County, and those increases allowed them to stay. That is a big help to me because that means I retain people that are qualified, who have a great deal of experience, and it cuts down on the training, the time that we spend training, and allows us to focus on the cases that we do have. So we are very appreciative of those increases. And that is all that I have. Any questions?
Any questions for our public defender? Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Conant, I just wanted to tell you, I appreciate your presentation. In looking at the salary increase, that's actually only about a 1.6% increase from 24 to 25. So even adding the vacant position and the support person, you're going to be well under the requested increase. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Ms. Conant.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to our Court Service Administration.
Morning, thank you. While Blair's pulling up our presentation, I want to acknowledge Chris Starkovich sitting next to me. He used to be a probation officer and then a supervisor within the probation unit, and on his own got his MBA going to school after work, after hours. And when we had a vacancy for our finance manager position, he was perfect because, you know, probation, court services, all the statutes that are involved, it's very complex. And he had that working knowledge, and then to be able to bring his financial training through graduate school was amazing opportunity for us. So I want to acknowledge him. He's here today in case I messed up. It's the one that I emailed yesterday. Okay. Nope. It'll say it's, you know, I'm very plain. I have a plain white background. So I guess it's outside of the packet, as it were.
It's right underneath my presentation.
And then also while Blair's pulling that up, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through every single line item. I did upload, thank you, that's it, Blair. I did upload the required report 1 and 2, so that's in the material. And I did screen captures of report 1 to go through that. But I'm not going to go line by line, but I will point out a few things. So Blair, you can go to the next slide. So just as a reminder or refresher, so court services is the overarching name of the department. It really entails probation, pretrial services, juvenile detention, and the diagnostic center. Next slide. I'm going to talk through all of this while you look at the next slide, but I wanted to include this so that you can go back and reference it. So next slide. So a couple of things to point out. And so this is, first of all, I'll address one of the questions that Mr. Tepe had earlier, which was noting that on that 24 amended budget column, where that first rectangle is, a small rectangle, it's got more numbers, like literally just at a glance, you can see it's got numbers where the other line items don't. So those numbers, those line items, the cost of living, the union wage increases, those are in the budget for the 25 submitted budget. It's already in there. So your numerator is different. And I'm pointing that out because it's not parallel to the other year. So it's going to be a little harder to look at. And I've got an arrow pointing to that 7.8% increase. I'm not actually looking for 7.8, and I'll get to that at the end. It's actually a 1% decrease, but it looks like a 7.8 because the numerator is different. You got me? So Mr. Tepe was right on the money. Those columns are not equal, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you. I was nodding my head vigorously when you were talking about that. The other thing is that I will note on there, I've got an oval, circled under the 24 amended budget that the equity study money was included into this year's budget. That was done after the budget was passed. Just for clarification, we opted out of that. We did not take that money. And in fact, at the end, you'll see I'm actually 1.7 million under budget. And that's in part because of that number. That number was added in. But our union is only receiving a 4% increase this year. And that equity study had some people receiving 20% increases. We could not in good conscience do that kind of differential increases and leave the unions out. We've suffered a strike already. I'm not eager to go back to that place. So in the interest of fairness within the department, that was why we withdrew from that study. The other thing is that I want to point out that very big, large triangle. That's another place where the numerator is going to look different because numbers are added in for 25 that were not there before. And what those are actually things that I agree with. So finance has added in the cost of workers' comp, of FICA, things like that, IMRF, to make it a true reflection of the budget. Awesome, got it. However, I think it's just a detail and I need to get with finance on it, but for the healthcare contribution contra account. So you can see they add it into our budget and then they take it out. So it's reflected in it. So we can account for it. They take it out so that it tried to make it even, but it's not. The contra account doesn't actually equal the amount that was entered. So again, the 25 budget's going to look a bit inflated because again, the numerator is not going to be the way it should be. And I have not taken obviously the time to go through everybody else's budget, but I would assume it would be similar across all departments. Also, to address an earlier question, I do note that our turnover, generally speaking, has substantially decreased since 23. It's great for program integrity. At one point, I'm going to talk about recidivism rates. And it's great for probation supervision, but it does mean that we are saving less money through those turnover costs. In my department, I'm guesstimating we save about $5,000 a year per employee per month that position's open. It takes us about 3 months to fill a position by the time we post it and we do all the interviewing. And then again, I'll say at the end, but just foreshadowing, our 25 submitted budget is actually 1% less than the 2023 actual budget and 3% less than the 24 budget. And I'll go through a couple of items that show that. So Blair, can you go to the next slide? So I know that's really hard to read and it's not very pretty, but I will point out, I mean, I went over a few things that are different. Our youth home reimbursement is down. It's good news because juvenile crime actually is down a bit. It's bad news because we earn revenue from other counties from holding their kids. So our revenue in that line item is down just a bit. With the addition of those 3 that you approved today, I anticipate it's going to go up a bit. So we'll see how that shakes out. The other thing is juvenile board and care. That's way down. That's line 50420, if you're looking at the budget. In 23, we spent 29,000 on that line item. In 24, we spent so far just under 100,000. And for 25, we'll see how that goes. We're asking for $432,000 for that line item. That line item is where we have to place juveniles who are criminally involved, but they're the perpetrator, not the victim. And so DCFS won't take those kids when they have to be removed from the home because DCFS works with victims. They do not work with perpetrators. So unfortunately, the criminal system gets to hold the bag on those kids who may have been victimized themselves earlier, and those are the only kids that we would hold in this line item where they're, very likely, KCDC have done an evaluation, they're very likely not to reoffend or to be open to rehabilitation, but they can't stay at home. Either the victim still lives at home, they're still at likelihood to perpetrate again, but we get held with that. So I'll talk about it later. So that is one potential line item that could be cut. It fluctuates quite a bit from year to year, and that also accounts for a little bit of the change. Blair, next page. On this page, I also want to point out in 2023, we paid almost $78,000 in conferences and meetings, $38,200, almost $33,000 for employee training. Court Services holds the budgets for all 4 of the specialty courts. We had a significant judge retire last year. And so we paid money for the judges and the teams within the courtrooms to be trained because we had to bring the new judges up to speed. Those specialty courts or the problem-solving courts are so specialized and they really fall outside of the normal kind of paradigm for what a judge would do. And so there's a lot of legal principles and really nuanced things that the judges have to know. So we spent a lot of money on their training. We're not anticipating that obviously for 2025, which is another reason why the budget is going to fall compared to last year. Another item that has fallen or is going to fall quite a bit is the food line item for the JJC, that's a commodity, 6230. We had a lot more kids in 2023, and so we spent a lot more on food. We have calorie obligations to meet. Next page. And then this line item, another reason why we're asking for significantly less on the automotive equipment. The county board approved us to purchase 3 vehicles last year. We're not asking for that this year. Therefore, it's not in the budget. That would be, a decrease of about $100,000. Same with special purpose equipment was purchased in 23 through an amendment, not asking for that this year. So overall, you can see if you look at the expense totals, those items I have circled in 23, it was 14.1 million was actually spent. In 24, our amended budget was 14.4 million, and we're only asking for about 14 million for 25. So it's actually a decrease from previous budgets. Can you go to the next slide, Blair? So these are some of our special funds. I'm not going to go through them in detail. They all have to balance, but this is probation fees. I put the statute number up there in particular. At the end of the presentation, I talk a little bit about if we had to cut, what could we cut? There are some items I could move to special funds, this probation fee, but the statute's very clear that it has to supplement, not supplant. And so I can only move items to this budget with AOIC approval, and that would be done after the budget if there were cuts, and that's how I would meet that obligation. Next slide. This is just totaling the probation fees. You can see we spend a lot of money on psychological services for people, addressing their underlying, we call them criminogenic needs. What is driving their need to commit crime, and we try to address that with them individually. Next slide. Substance abuse screening. We do a lot of drug testing. I'll go over that in a minute. And that's what we use that fund for. Next slide. Drug court special resources. This is a special fund. We receive a lot of federal grants, or we try really hard to receive grants. And so this is the fund that accounts for that. The majority of things like residential treatment, lab services, those psychological line items, the contractual line items, those all come out of this fund. Next slide. And the probation victim services. This is again a statutory obligation for us to give money to agencies in the community that work with victims. And we have to do this because we receive probation fees off of court cases. Next slide. And then the Juvenile Justice Donation Fund. I want to give a shout out to Hallie from the Law Library, because Hallie is our volunteer librarian for the JJC. We don't have a paid librarian. Hallie comes in and does it. And so the majority of this fund is used to either purchase books, because we love reading and we want those kids to read. When they go into the rooms at night, that's it. They're locked in the rooms, one kid to a room, and we let them have 4 books. So they go through books, and we love that. So Hallie organizes the library, fixes the books, repairs them for further use, and buys new ones. And that's what we use that fund for. And next slide. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of go over, generally speaking, big picture, my budget. So as has been said before, 87% of the budget is people. Of the contractual and the commodities, that does add up altogether for about $1.7 million. However, I list out, or I pull out the major items that we're spending money on. And you can see the only big ticket items I have, or the biggest, have to do with the kids in juvenile detention, which also I will add, juvenile detention by statute has to come out of the general fund. And so over the years, as the county has tightened its belt, I have shifted as much to come out of special funds as it can, but juvenile detention matters have to come out of the general fund, which is also why when we enter those intergovernmental agreements with other counties, that goes back into the general fund to reimburse the county. So the county is not actually spending any taxpayer dollars for those kids. The county's being reimbursed. So our biggest contractual line item is for medical. Superintendent Mike Davis has come in front of this board on numerous occasions to talk about the medical contract. He's worked very hard to try to keep those costs down. Juvenile boarding care, I talked about a little bit, and the psychiatry, a lot of that is for the juvenile justice kids. Overwhelmingly, what we find is that a lot of the minors who are being held in detention have underlying mental health issues. And when, the same as you've all been to our drug court graduations, you know that our drug court people, once we get them clean and sober, we almost always find some kind of underlying mental health issue. And so it's really important for us to be able to have that line item. A lot of what our psychiatrist does is not diagnosing and treating, it's actually compliance. Like we do a lot of drug testing for med compliance to make sure they're taking their meds. And then again, our largest commodities are is food for the kids at the JJC. That's what that's for. Next slide. For our funding sources, I wanted to make sure to talk about this because as the county contemplates cuts, it's important to have a nuanced conversation about what that means. Because for a department like court services, the state salary reimbursement, so King County pays out our salaries on the front end, and then the state comes in and reimburses you for those salaries. So can you go to the next slide, Blair? So I love my little Star Trek guy. I drew him. So this kind of illustrates what I'm talking about. So that whole person, right, is one of our employees. That red portion at the top is what King County pays. And the black portion is what the state of Illinois is reimbursing you. So they will reimburse for salary, but not benefits. So essentially what you're paying for is benefits. So as an example, if you were to ask for, $100,000 in cuts. That might be one employee in the public defender's office, but it's going to be 3 employees in my office, because in order to meet that 100,000, I've got to cut 3 people, because all you're paying for is benefits, which might be 20,000 or 30,000 each. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that is something that sometimes gets glossed over, gets missed, that cuts, if they're distributed evenly across departments, do not result in equal cuts by any means whatsoever. Next slide. This is just another example of a kind of reimbursement. Those are salary subsidies. Next slide. So this is kind of detailing out how many employees I have and the level of reimbursement that you're getting from the state. So I have, 92 grant and aid. That means all you're paying for it are the benefits. Pretrial is the same. The state of Illinois is picking up the cost of their salaries. The salary subsidy, you're not getting as much. 40 people are Kane County funded. By statute, the county has to pick up the cost of support staff, as well as currently you're picking up the cost of the KCDC staff. And I'll talk about that in a minute. That actually saves over $1 million for the county, because if I had to purchase what they do on the private market, it would cost significantly more. This year, because we've added the DUI court, it's a brand new court for us, and we're picking up more residents from around the state in juvenile detention. I'm requesting that the AOIC give us more staff or reimburse us more staff. I have not included them in the budget for Kane County because I want the state of Illinois to approve it first, and then I'll come to you and ask you for a budget amendment after I've been assured that we'll get reimbursement for those positions. Right now, I do have one DUI court staff that I just hired, but I'm leaving open a different position. I kind of swapped them out. So I haven't increased my overall head count, but I'm trying to staff these courts. But that does mean like I'm down right now a CRS coordinator. So like if you've known anyone who's ever had a DUI, for example, they have a certain number of hours of community service they have to do. I only have one person doing that for the entire county right now, because I'm using the other open position to do my specialty courts. So I am petitioning and asking the AO to reimburse more people. The JJC supervisor that's currently county funded has always been county funded. I'm just asking for that. So that'll be additional revenue without an expenditure for the county. Next slide. This is just a comparison side by side if you want to see the priorities and how the funding of the various units within court services has gone. You can see that the Juvenile Justice Center does slightly take up more of the resources of the department. But again, that's because I'm trying to shift as much as I can to special funds, but the detention has to come out of the general fund. Next slide. This just breaks that down again. So you can see visually what the money is going towards and what the scope of the programs. Next slide. This just breaks it down by how many staff and what are the major functions are within each unit for the court services department. Next slide. Probation, we have 3 field offices for probation. We have an office in Elgin, in Aurora, as well as here at the Judicial Center. And we do a variety of functions there. That is by far and away the largest number of staff that we have fulfilling those functions when you include administration. Next slide. So I won't go over all of these, but I will note, so that top slide, the first one, adult probation client supervised, that is those numbers come from the monthly reports that I give to you so that you have that information every month. But just as a reminder, we supervise 2,400 people or so on a regular adult probation. 800 or so people we're supervising who are from other counties but committed their crime in Kane, but we're supervising them while they live in another county. About 800 or so people are on conditional discharge, and again, just under 1,000 people have been sentenced to community service work. That again, I don't have anyone. I only have one person to supervise that whole 1,000 people. The other thing I will point out that I'm in concurrence with Public Defender Conant when she talks about interpersonal violence, about domestic violence being a big drain on our resources. Our largest, that bottom right slide, the statutory violation entries for adult, we had overwhelmingly new offenses are domestic violence and fights. for our young adults and domestic violence for our regular adults. But even with that 100 or so violations, and then all the other violations combined, including DUI and drug offenses and traffic offenses, our recidivism rate is still only 13% in adult probation, which is astoundingly low when you look across the state. Other departments tend to be more like 20 or 30%. So I'm very proud of that. But again, we do something called differential supervision. I've talked about that before. I'll talk about it another time. Next slide. For the problem-solving courts, just some information on who all we supervise. We do over 1,000 drug tests a month. Of those drug tests that we do, including for the specialty courts, our positive rate is very low. And again, I think it's because we really try to address the underlying mental health condition so they're not self-medicating, and we address those issues with them. We do have a lot of people testing positive for THC, but I will note that those are drug tests, not people. So that could be, 500 people testing positive repeatedly. And that is overwhelmingly the largest category of drug use that we see in probation. Next slide. This is our pretrial. I won't go into it too much again because it's on line for you. We submit this every month. We do have over 3,000 people that we're supervising on the pretrial caseload. The majority of that supervision includes texting them and reminding them about court. Next slide. Just as a reminder, we do have this available as a dashboard, so you can look up for yourself to see in real time what's happening in bond call, as we used to call it, or first appearance court. Next slide. This is our juvenile. I like to look at that bottom graph about what are the kinds of crimes that are being sentenced to juvenile probation. It's a lot of battery. Young adults are very impulsive. Next slide. Juvenile detention, we have 72 staff there. That bottom graph again shows the top offenses that are being held there. Detention is only for the most serious crimes or the chronic failure to appear or people who abscond. So we see a lot of weapons offenses, a lot of violent offenses. That top slide shows our admissions by age. I think that one's important too, because I think people forget that juvenile detention by statute, we don't get a lot of 10-year-olds. They could be eligible to be detained if the offense was serious enough, all the way up to 20-year-olds. The way that a 20-year-old gets admitted to juvenile detention is perhaps they committed an offense when they were 16 or 17, got 3 years probation, they've committed a new offense or they're in violation of their probation, but now they're 19 or 20 years old. They're still held in juvenile because even though they're of age, their case type is juvenile. And so the court works really quickly to get them out because we don't want to house a 12-year-old with a 19-year-old. That's not good. But that is a possibility. The majority of kids we do house, though, are those 16 and 17-year-olds, and those kids like to fight. I'll just put that out there. Our workers' comp is a lot. Next page. Diagnostic Center. Those are some examples at the bottom of the kinds of evaluations they do. They do a lot of full psychologicals, a lot of fitness to stand trial evaluations, and sex offender evaluations. Those are required by statute. So when they're doing these evaluations, not only are they just saying whether or not they're fit to stand trial, but the likelihood that they could if they were rehabilitated, if they got an intervention. And so altogether, they did 411. Those are our stats from 22. Next slide. But the reason that that becomes important, especially when we're considering cuts, is because if I had to take those 411 evaluations that were court-ordered, we don't just do them. We don't find them. These are court orders. They come from the judges and order us to find out, are they fit to stand trial? If we had to go to the open market, that would cost $5,000 to $6,000 per evaluation to do. Whereas the staff at KCDC are making around $100,000 a year. That's easy math. That's about $2,000 per evaluation to do because they take about a week to do. It's 40 hours of testing and report writing. And then they often get called to court to give expert testimony as to the validity of their reports. So having said all that, the other big thing that I want you to know as the county moves forward in the budgeting process is that the majority of the court services staff belong to unions. We're bound by a collective bargaining agreement. So even if we were to do cuts, I have to sit down with the union and negotiate that with them. And then I have to negotiate with the administrative office, filling in courts, and the judges to say, who are we cutting? What programs are we cutting? Can we operate effectively as a court system? And what does this look like? And all of that takes time. Next slide. So I did take the time, Ms. Juby, who's not here today, did ask me, if we had to make cuts, what would it look like? And so I looked at everything that I could cut easily. It's still not easy because, juvenile boarding care is in there. That's a statutory obligation. They're all statutory obligations and they would take some time. But for our department, it would mean like 8 staff just to achieve under a $300,000 cut. And again, that's because Kane County is picking up the majority of the cost of that person. So in order to achieve a commensurate amount of $288,000, that's 8 people. And because we're a union shop, it's last hired, first fired. So I don't get to select this skill set as redundant. I'm getting rid of you. I have to go by who was the last one hired. And that might be the one with the most certifications or the most specialty. And so then I have to let them go. And then I have to look at and evaluate my staff and rearrange it how best it can meet the needs of the court. And so that list is actually what it would mean today if I had to make those cuts. I would have to decrease my specialty courts by 2 probation officers. It would severely impact the operations of the court. In 5 months, that might look different because our turnover will be different. And I believe that that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ost. Any comments or questions for court services at this time? No, thank you for including that those last couple of regarding the potential budget cuts. I think Mr. Berman appreciates that. Okay, we will move on to our circuit clerk.
Can you hear me okay? There you go. I have bronchitis, so I might start coughing in the middle of this, but. Okay, so here is my budget presentation. I would like to point out that, of course, numbers changed at the last minute, like all the rest of us. So, let's see. Next slide. You're right. I do like the clicker better, Terry. These are our responsibilities in what we do at the circuit clerk's office. I'm not going to go through everything because I know you guys have been here a while. These are all our locations that we have clerks in. As you see, we have our main location, our 3 branch courts, and the Judicial Center and the 3rd Street Courthouse. We also do remote court in the 4 locations here, for the 4 locations here. Oh, I have to keep telling them, don't I? Okay, can you please go to slide 5? Thank you. Okay, so this gives a little bit description of our court document and our records mandated by the state statute. Everything we do is mandated by the 16th Judicial State Statute for the courts and through our record keeping manual that also comes from the state. Next slide. We are still, you all know the Pretrial Fairness Act went into effect on September 18th, which also brought our revenue down along with previous COVID issues. So next slide. This is our organizational chart. It has changed a little bit since yesterday. We had some corrections made with the finance department, but currently we have 68 union employees and 5 vacant positions in our union. We have 27 non-union employees and 8 non-union vacant positions. We also have 1 judiciary position that is actually comes out of one of the special revenue funds that we collect for, but the person is from IT and he is in the chief judge's office. But he comes out of our budget, so that's always been confusing, but that's how the county does it. Next slide. So as you see, this slide is incorrect because we had changes in the middle of the night and I corrected it at 3 a.m. So we have 5 deputy clerks remaining vacant. We have 2 in background check currently, so that would bring us down to 3. Currently, our supervisors are taking turns on those pressing issues because you all know we have to have deputy clerks. We have to fill the courtrooms. We do have 8 non-union positions in our special funds. That is the supervisor, office trainer, operations assistant manager, financial supervisor, and an HR position, and our security officer. Now, we are planning on obtaining a smart safe, which should be the revenue generated. It shouldn't be a cost to the county. We've looked at our fees and that we pay to the bank. And this would also be a secure way of having the dollars transported back and forth from courthouse to the main office. And it also is going to be set up so when we deposit into it, it would go directly into the bank computers. Saves a lot on our staff and our accounting and finance department. Once we have that in place, which we are looking at probably in the fall, maybe possibly early of 25, then we will need another security officer part-time, because we will need a security officer that would be able to be the courier for the locations to bring the dollars back and forth. Right now, our immediate need is to fill all of our deputy clerks that are in the 2024 approved budget. Once all the deputy clerks are filled, then we will move on to our non-union positions. Next slide. This just breaks down the cases that have been filed, the e-file transaction and head count from 2018 to today. If you look at this, these are projected numbers going into 25. But if you look at this, we had in 2018, there was 126 employees at the circuit clerk's office. That slowly was decreased. Then, of course, the Safety Act came in and we had to have some Safety Act positions. We have filled most of those. We've taken 3 off of our budget for next year because it's impossible to try and keep up with that. We need to just keep the ship going. And the only way to do that is just to stay on course. So we've removed that. So we'll have 109 employees, 110 if you include me. And currently, our mid-year case filings are already up 11%. Most of our transactions come from e-filing, which we have 7 employees that do that from home at no cost to the county. And if you take a look at that, a lot of our cases are going all electronic now rather than paper, which is a good thing. But we still need employees to man those computers to put everything in order correctly. Next slide. To define the critical need of manpower at the circuit clerk's office. Again, to quote what Lisa just said, Commissioner Juby asked us to give a list, and so did Commissioner Berman, of what that would look like for us. And one thing that's very, very important in the circuit clerk's office is that we have all 32 courtrooms manned. So we process all the documents, we train and assist judges on using the applications and software. We train and assist local prosecutors on using applications and software, conduct analysis for the state of Illinois, and reporting process of statistics, pretrial court hearings, which is previous bond call, They require an extra deputy clerk, which the PD just discussed. They're there from 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And we usually go about 2 hours later than the rest of the staff that is there. Excuse me. So those dollars are going to start going up. We've already been regulating that with the chief judge. They are honestly considering opening another courtroom for it, which would then require another deputy clerk there. Appeals have increased with the new PFA. If you look at this, this is another breakdown. Our workforce in 2018 was 126 employees. Excuse me, 110 in 2019, 100. Sorry. This has been going on for a couple of days, so I apologize. 107 in 2020, 106 in 2021, and then 2022, we had the Safety Act employees, 114, 23 Safety Act. We didn't hire them all. 24, still haven't hired them all. We're down to 109. The finance department is requesting that we base our employee count on where we are at currently for 2024, which is kind of not justifiable because we're not done with the year. So the finance department is asking us to base it on 99 employees, which would leave me short, obviously. So we plan on filling all our positions that we are short by the end of the year so we can maintain them for next year. This is hugely important. I know Mr. Tepe mentioned in his presentation, which was very informative, on what it would cost the county on layoffs or cutting staff. And my suggestion is, you're saying 3%, don't increase your budgets 3%. I get that. That's our contractual expenses before we even open our budget books. That doesn't include our union contracts. That doesn't include cost of living, et cetera, the insurance that's gone up. It doesn't include any of that. But the reality is when you cut, it's easier to cut percentages than it is vacancies, because that's a misconception. If you look at the vacancies that you were discussing, Mr. Tepe, you said the average person is 60,000. Well, that's 2 of my average people. So you said 13 people, that would be 26 in my department. Just to show you, because we have a union contract, which means we have to start at the bottom, just like court services. So 26 people that make $30,000 a year is what you're going to see gone. Who's going to do those? Who's going to handle the work for those positions? Next slide. Defining the critical response times. We have reporting requirements from the Pretrial Fairness Act, the collection of data from multiple offices. We maintain the increasing workload on current Kane County ITD and case management system. We implement all statewide requirements in the 284 statutes mandated by the state of Illinois. Next slide. The cause and effect from losing, now this number, like I said, has changed so many times since the last 24 hours. My estimate is that we are down 13 employees, I believe. So 5 of those are deputy clerks. But if we lose those employees, then we'll have to close courtrooms due to the lack of deputy clerks. The duties remaining for those remaining courtrooms is increased to accommodate the closed courtrooms, unable to answer the telephones. Statutory required timely reporting is delayed. Public wait longer times for a court date. People will be sitting in jail longer for a court date. Child support payments will be delayed. Payments to other state and local and county agencies could possibly be delayed. Employees will be handling day-to-day issues, delayed response times to the public, the Kane County Judicial Partners, and we will no longer be awarded grants because we will not have the time to work on them. Next slide. This is something I've talked about throughout past 2 years. I'm very, very, very proud of. When I took office in 2020, Judge Hull brought this to our attention in 21, that with the clearance rate statistics that the state of Illinois puts out in their summary for the state, we were at 44.4% closing rate in 2020. And a person applied for a position here and thought, why, can you explain why this is happening? And that's how we kind of got paid attention to this. So with the implementation to upgrading our case management system, which we have put $4 million into back in 2015, not including the costs that to keep it going, and the upgrades that we have established through IT and our IT people. We are now at, for 2022, closing rate is 139.1%. That's huge. That's the top in the state of Illinois. That's huge. We are pillars in the state of Illinois. When there are issues with case management systems or discussion as far as the Pretrial Fairness Act, we've been on presentations. The 16th Judicial has been to the state on presentations for this. We are constantly sought out for the improvements that we have made in the circuit clerk's office from 2018. And we are very, very proud of the direction we are going. And we are working with less as it is. We are bare bones, but we keep trugging along. And the revenue would be there if we didn't have how many things we could talk about. COVID, the Pretrial Fairness Act. There's many things we could go on with this as far as the revenue, but it is what it is. We're working with what we have. Next slide. So this is a breakdown of our circuit clerk total salary and benefits, and these are how many employees are in each fund. As you know, the general fund has the bulk of our employees. The other funds are our special funds, and we have jurisdiction over those funds and how many employees are in those funds and the removal of any dollars of those funds. The next slide, please. If you look at this, this is incorrect also. I believe the numbers are actually closer to 5.7% less than last year, which we're very, very proud of. You ask, how are we doing that? And that is if we include every vacancy that we still have in the budget, because we have lost employees at higher rate and hired at lower rates. Okay. So if you look at the dollars that we have spent or not spent over the years from the circuit clerk's office, it's all on employees. So we can, it's impossible for us to cut any more of our staff. Next slide. This is a question that it comes up a lot, and Commissioner Leonard's not here. I put this together specifically for him. These are the dollars and the total cases that have been collected since 2020. Well, since 2021, because I started in December, so we count 2021. They've gone down also because of legislation. Sometimes it's hard to collect on back fines and fees, but to date, we are at 200,733 for 1295 cases. Next slide. this slide gives you a good idea of the dollars and cents that have gone on at the circuit clerk's office. It also shows you the waived by judiciary, which is fines and fees that are waived for whatever reason. Someone might not have a job or in between jobs, or they just ask for a waive and they get it. So if you look at the dollars that have come in, not come in, excuse me, when I enlarge this so I can actually read it on my computer since I'm pretty much blind these days. In 2023, the waive amount for the count, the amount that was waived, let's see, actual waived. So in 2023, the judiciary waived $3,572,000. That's a lot. That's a lot. So this will give you just a general idea of what our revenue is and what our actual expenditures are, and the amount that's waived through the county. Next slide. So back to the revenue decrease, which I know has been like a thorn in my side since I got in office. I recall a day when, we would have conversations on salaries and I would be told, well, revenue's down. Well, yeah, revenue's down. So the courts waived in 2023. This is incorrect. It says 6 million, but it was 3 million. To date in 2024, they've waived 1,636,000. Actual revenue is generated lower. We've never recovered from the pandemic. Remote courts, unfortunately, people don't have respect. They don't, they feel that they don't need to pay because they're on Zoom. But they still need to pay. It's handier, of course. It allows everybody to have their day in court, but unfortunately, they tend to forget that they still owe some money. It's incident-based practice. All charges are under the highest offense. You used to be able to charge for several offenses. You can't do that anymore. The fee schedule is only charged once. And the fee breakdown, schedule breakdown shows a less percentage going to the circuit clerk's office than other offices throughout the county. My mic keeps going out. So if you look at this, we have a 0% increase that I can tell as of right now. We want to maintain our 109 head count. If we can maintain it without increasing our budget, and we've decreased it more than our 3% that was required, I don't see what the issue would be. Most of those employees, again, I would say, are coming out of special funds, which I have total jurisdiction over. I understand the general fund is the county's, and I will do my best for what's best for my office for that fund. Next slide. So these are some of the things that we are highlighting here at the circuit clerk's office. We've expanded our hours at the Aurora Branch Court so that folks can come in and pay fees and fines up till 3 o'clock. We've increased our entry-level pay to $18.46 an hour. It was $13.59 when I first got in, $13.59. That was in 2020. We've established timeline for continual upgrades with our case management system, which is also known as Tyler Odyssey. Currently, we are installing 2023 so that court services and the public defender's office will be able to hop on to some of that. We've also continued restructuring our office, combining our court and office team for more efficient operations in the courtrooms. We've held expungement clinics again that Haley just discussed twice a year. We're trying to expand those quarterly, but we also have an issue because that is donated time by staff. They come in, we do it on a Saturday, we're there all day. It's all donated time by our staff. We continue to increase diversity in the office. We continually see the Pretrial Fairness Act, the impacts and future needs with reporting through the state of Illinois. We are going to be implementing a defendant access computer system with a kiosk, which will be at no cost to us from Tyler, and we're planning on putting that at the JC. We've just had a UPS upgrade, which one of our staff had to be there from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And the report all was implemented for the AOIC rules. I think I pretty much covered everything. Sorry if that took over 10 minutes, but I could probably sit here for another half hour. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer as best I can.
Any questions for our circuit clerk at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Williams.
Ms. Perrio, has technology and software reduced your demands for staff members? I mean, when I was a young lawyer, I'd be over at your office all the time, pulling files and filing things. And now I never go. We never go.
Right.
So I'm just curious if that's been a benefit to your office or.
It has. We were just discussing this on Monday, and I believe, I'm just going to give a round number. Let's say there was 25, I think they talked about 25,000 requests of people coming to the office to get records. And out of those 25,000, 2,000 had to be pulled off a shelf. So it has helped tremendously. But behind the scenes, you need people to operate it behind the scenes. So it might decrease in one area that you see, but then it'll increase in another area. But I think we've done a great job efficiently is spacing the workload out. And like I said, it was 126 employees in 2018. And now we could run efficiently if we were full staffed at 109.
You spoke a lot about the impact of waiving court fees by the judiciary, and I'm curious what communications are going on between your office and the chief judge's office about communicating the impact of those waivers on your budget.
It has been discussed in the past. The main issue was COVID. It's actually a domino effect because first it was the foreclosure issue and people losing their jobs. And then, so if someone were to come in and say they cannot pay their fund, they just can't pay it, then they fill out a waiver and a judge would sign it. It's on the table for discussions again this year. But it's the domino effect. And in the state of Illinois, I don't believe you can actually you used to be able to ask somebody to have proof as to if they could pay these fines and fees. And I don't believe you can do that anymore. I'm not sure, but it's kind of like a HIPAA law. You can't get into detail. Somebody might be able to correct me on that.
Go ahead, Rochelle, you're going to.
I can answer a little bit for you. So under the law as it is now, for our clients, if we have been appointed, we file an affidavit with our plea paperwork that waives their fines and costs based on the fact that we are appointed. So as you can imagine, we represent a large majority of the criminal defendants in the system. So if they're getting their fees waived. And so that goes back to when the judges appoint us, what should be happening is that there is a question and answer between the potential person and the judge about their financial situation at that time. And there is a chart that they can use that lays out where they fall in the poverty guidelines as to whether they qualify for our services.
And just to be clear too, on the civil side, forms, the judges, I believe, used to have more discretion and more questioning involved on if in fact they're going to grant a fee waiver. Now the form has changed and there's less discretion. They check certain boxes. If they check a box, they get the fees waived. So it's not necessarily that the judges are waiving more. It's the requirements have changed to allow for a waiver of fees.
Right. State statute, correct.
Okay, any other questions for our circuit clerk at this time? Okay, thank you, Ms. Barrero.
Thank you.
Okay, onto the agenda. Does anybody have any old business they'd like to discuss? Any new business the committee would like to bring up? Okay, I'd request unanimous consent to place reports on file.
Roth will make the request to put a unanimous request to put the reports on file.
Any objections? Okay, reports are placed on file. May I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
And Roth will second.
Mr. Williams moves, Mr. Roth seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Rochelle.